Thank you all for joining us today for our discussion on implementation of mental health and suicide prevention initiatives in large four-year schools. My name is Brian Nito, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm really excited to be joined by two panelists, Michelle Cooper of the University of Arkansas-Fayetteville and Valerie Donovan of University of Wisconsin-Madison, who will be sharing their thoughts and insights on the topic and what they have done on their respective campuses to address them. But before I have them introduce themselves and share a little bit about their schools, I'd like to set some webinar ground rules. This presentation will be recorded. A copy of the presentation slides will be sent after the webinar for all registrants. Attendees are all in listen-only mode, but if you do have a question, please submit them in the chat box where it says questions as highlighted by the red box. You can also connect with us on Twitter at Cognito, and please feel free to hashtag CognitoWebinars. Now I'm going to turn it over to my panelists first, Michelle Cooper of the University of Arkansas.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk about our implementation at the University of Arkansas. First, just a little bit about us. We are in the northwest corner of Arkansas in a small college town called Fayetteville, but our area is unique because we are close to the headquarters of Walmart. So it brings a neat dynamic to our town and makes us a little bit of a unique place within the side of Arkansas. We have about 27,000 students on our campus, and the implementation of Cognito comes out of CAPS and is funded partially by Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS, where I work, and Pat Walker Health Center, which is what we are under. CAPS participates in a couple of different national initiatives. We did for the first year this year the Healthy Mind Study through the University of Michigan. We're part of CCMH, the Collegiate Center for Mental Health, and we're really excited about this. We're going to be implementing the ISP program through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in the fall. So this has all been a really quick shift for us. I would say 2 years ago, we did not have any kind of formal suicide prevention program. So I will share hopefully what I've learned and what to do and what not to do. So we can go on to the next slide.
Thanks, Michelle. And then let's hear from Valerie at Wisconsin-Madison.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and I guess good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. So my name is Valerie Donovan. I work as the Suicide Prevention Coordinator at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I've been in this role for about 4.5 years, and that's right around when we started our Suicide Prevention Initiative, was with my position beginning. So the UW-Madison, similar to Michelle's campus, is the flagship university for the UW system. So we have a total enrollment on our campus of just over 43,000 students. About 32,000 of those are undergraduate students. And on our campus, I think something that is important to know about us is our guiding principle across campus is the Wisconsin idea. And this is really the idea that our university and our graduates should improve people's lives beyond the classroom. We are also the top producer of Peace Corps volunteers in the country, so service is a very important part of our mission. I think another thing that's important to know about our institution is that we offer many other online education programs, including some mandatory first-year programs around alcohol, sexual assault, and diversity training. And so when I'm talking about our implementation of at-risk and the Cognito programs, that's kind of parallel to and sometimes unfortunately in competition with other online programs. And so I'll share some of those strategies that we use to mitigate that. So on our campus, we also are participating in the JED Foundation's campus program, and that's done through our campus-wide Suicide Prevention Council, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And I guess I just want to point out at this point, too, that I'm happy to have folks reach out and follow up after the webinar as well.
And thank you, Valerie. And we'll share the contact information for all three of us on the last slide. Now, as I mentioned, my name is Brian, and I'm the Director of Client Experience here at Cognito. And my team and I work with folks like Michelle and Valerie to assist in promoting our mental health programs, which I'll give you all a sneak peek of in a little bit. Now, Cognito is a health simulation company that creates a suite of mental health simulations to train faculty, staff, and students around the topic that we're discussing today. We really focus on how to approach students showing signs of psychological distress and talk with them about seeking help. Now, these simulations are listed in the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices, or NREP, and our simulations are all evidence-based and currently utilized by over 350 schools nationwide. Now, we look forward to sharing some of those best practices from Michelle, Valerie, and Cognito's programs with everyone in this discussion. So now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to talk about her initiatives occurring at the University of Arkansas.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, I think when we started Cognito, this, like I had mentioned before, this was the first thing that we had really done formally in the suicide prevention field on campus. I came in as a clinician about 3 years ago with an interest in the field of suicidology and kind of began wondering why we didn't have anything more formalized here. So after begging and pleading for about a year, I was finally able to get people to agree to bring Cognito on board, but felt, quite a bit of pressure because this was our money. Not that there's not pressure with grant money, there certainly is, but felt a lot of pressure. So really worked hard to lay a lot of groundwork in our implementation. And I really think that's where our foundation was for doing pretty well with laying out Cognito. We did a lot of one-to-one meetings with people on campus. My director would call it our dog and pony show, and I felt a little bit like, if anybody's ever seen the movie Tommy Boy, that we were going around just really selling this program to anybody we could. We would sit down in meetings with academic chairs, with department heads, with staff members, with really anybody that would sit down and listen to us and try to explain to them why we thought Cognito would benefit them, and really ask them how it could be used in reaching their departmental goals. What we know about our university from the CCMH data is that, our students are presenting within the average or more acute as compared to national students. So we know that everybody on campus is dealing with mental health, and so we were really trying to, through these conversations with them, see how we could all work together to do this, because we all know that it can't just be at the counseling center. So what we did was basically sit down, explain this great program, ask if they were interested, and really gave them 3 different options or ways that we could roll it out in their department or program. And one of those options was that they could just, we would give them the login for information and they could just do it, and that would be the end of the story. Another option is that we could come in and introduce it to them in their department, and then they could do it. And then the last option was that they could have their department do it, and then we would come in and do a debriefing afterwards. And people seem to really enjoy having those options and the idea that they weren't just going to be given this thing and kind of left to be in the atmosphere with this information without getting to process it with anyone. We also really wanted to hone in on kind of what their concerns were about Cognito or the discussion if they weren't really interested in it. And, we found out some really interesting things. We found out that suicide prevention was making people really nervous on our campus. So we learned very quickly that we kind of had to backdoor this a little bit and really guise it under students in distress. And this was really difficult for me to do because I'm an advocate. I want to call it what it is. I want to be straightforward. But I realized that it was going to take people a little bit of time to warm up. And we also needed to identify who our champions were. And then we could kind of move forward with the message of suicide prevention. We also found out that people that we really thought would be allies with us maybe weren't, and we came up with some really surprising people that were. And I think a good example of that is our veterans program here. And we really thought that this would just be a natural alliance, and what we found out was that they were fearful to bring in Cognito because they were afraid that the veterans would feel stigmatized. So we went ahead and just kind of problem solved how to communicate and work with different people and gave people space that they needed. But we knew that we were on people's radar, and soon enough people started to come to us for trainings or would refer people to us. And I think the neatest thing about these one-on-one meetings that we had is it gave us a really good idea of who has been touched by mental health and who became what we call our champions. So, department chairs that we would have never known have been affected by suicide or have lived experience, we found out. And now we have great relationships with them. And thus, they're a great faculty partner for us and can speak a language that we necessarily can't. So these meetings, I think, were just key. I mean, I really didn't like a lot of it. I'm not a natural salesperson. I worked in retail, and that was a disaster. But this really, as tiring as it is and kind of as a lot of legwork as it was, they really laid a great foundation for getting people to buy into Cognito and what we were trying to do on campus. So you can go ahead with the next slide. So, we really also targeted faculty and staff. And we knew this because I had listened to webinars like this and had been talking to people at Cognito, and we knew that historically this was a difficult group to engage, especially faculty. And we felt that it was really important for us to target them and to get them to learn the strategies, because we also knew that these were the people that were coming to us, that were coming to the Dean of Students' office, that felt very helpless. And if we could give them something that would help them, then we thought that that could change the story on our campus. And we also felt that naturally, if we were able to engage them and they were excited about this, that it would be a lot more than just the counseling center trying to engage students. It would be, an entire campus full of faculty and staff members that were trying to really get students on board with this, and that would be helpful to us. And what we found out is that that worked. And, when we had students that had to, complete the training because they were an RA, or had to do it because they were in another leadership position, they were going to other organizations where they were leaders or they were a part of and saying, hey, we need to bring this in. And so it just had a really interesting domino effect and helped us quite a bit. I mean, we had some very key partners. Housing was on board with us from day one, and we have about 6,000 to 7,000 students that live on campus. But housing did a sweep from the top down. Everybody on their staff had to complete Cognito. All of their RAs did the training, and thus they really pushed that with their students. So that was really key and also allowing us to kind of talk to other people on campus and saying, well, how are things working with us? And this is how it's working, and this is what's going well, and really also kind of bolstered us across campus and made people more accepting of it. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so we have a lot of things that didn't work. I just narrowed this down to 4 things, but trust me when I say there are a lot more than 4 things that didn't work. But the big ones are, I had a bright idea that maybe if I sent this really compelling email to our academic department chairs, especially the ones that we hadn't met with personally, that they would just be so enamored with what we were talking about and really see the good in what we were doing and just jump right on board. And 0 people responded to that email, and it was, literally never spoken of again. It just did not work at all, and really proved that those one-on-one conversations were just invaluable to be able to explain what Cognito was about and what we were trying to accomplish. Last year we decided that we were going to have a competition between the dorms, between the first 3 weeks of school. Our dorms are mostly freshmen, and they open up a week before school starts. And so that is to accommodate the band and to accommodate a sorority rush that goes on during that week. You can imagine having a week full of dorms with freshmen that have no classes, that have never been away from home, and what that looks like. And so there's a lot of push by the university to try to pack those weeks for them. So we thought, oh, this would be perfect. We'll do this competition. And it really, I don't know if we didn't have enough time to dedicate to it, or, we didn't get people on board quite as we wanted to, but it also fell pretty flat, and it was pretty time intensive and labor intensive, and just didn't give us the numbers that we were hoping it would. We also discovered that printed handouts at our outreach events weren't going to do it. Students on our campus, for some reason, aren't going to do this unless somebody is having a conversation with them about doing it, or they're required to do it through a class or as a leader on campus. And, we really worked on counting on obvious alliances. We thought in the beginning, oh my gosh, we've got this psychology department that we're involved with. We take their students and train them. We've got this counselor education department, and we take their students and train with them. And, nursing is going to be very interested in this. And none of that was true. We found allies in really odd places. And so I think it was important, again, going back, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but going back to those one-on-one kind of anybody that would talk to us meetings, and figuring out who was really interested in this and who would really work with us. So I'm sure we'll do 100 other things that don't work in the next year, but the important thing is that we've kind of learned from it and learned what the culture of our campus is within the context of Cognito, and are trying to really tailor outreaches to that. And so some of our best practices was, we really wanted, this was coming out of CAPS, and we really wanted our CAPS staff to feel confident and competent in talking about Cognito. So we spent a lot of time training our staff. So when they were at an outreach, or they were having a discussion with a professor, or somebody called, a staff member called because there was an emergency and they weren't sure what to do, we could talk about how Cognito could help them down the road. And with that, it was, creating kind of this little elevator speech about Cognito. So anywhere we were, anytime, if somebody said, how do we help a student? We could, in 1 minute, tell you about how great Cognito is, why you should do it, why you should bring it into your department, how it's going to help you, how it's going to help your student, and how it's going to help the mission of the university. And I think another thing that we did was being really mindful of who we were talking to and how to tailor the message. You know, at first we were really kind of rigid about these debriefings. We were going in, we were using the guides, we were asking the questions, and it just kind of felt a little bit flat to me. And so when I started to go in after people would do Cognito and just talk about, you know, what they learned and what was going on with them and what were their concerns, we started to have really good discussions about mental health on campus and how to help students and how to help each other, and got people to learn that you don't have to be a clinician to do this, that it's really just about being kind of a good human being. And the changes were amazing, and it was really neat. And I think lastly, being okay with laughing at yourself and making mistakes and getting lots of blank stares. I mean, this, you know, not everybody is going to get Cognito, and there are certain departments that will never buy into it. And so, you know, we keep going back and we keep trying, but it's not always going to work. So we've had a lot of fun with it, and never taken ourselves too seriously with it. And I think it's really changed the culture of our campus, and opened up a discussion that I really feel like wouldn't be here without Cognito. So that's my 2 cents. So, oh, I have more. My aha moments. We discovered you know, that a lot of faculty and staff that found themselves in situations where they didn't know how to talk to students, and I think I touched on this a little bit before. You know, they would call us because they had a concern, or they would, you know, not be sure. They would have these students but not be sure, or they'd be writing into the Dean of Students office that a student wrote this in a paper and they're concerned. You know, we could present Cognito as a very kind of concrete solution to them, which, you know, depending on what their background is or what academic department they're from, that very concrete solution could be very, very helpful and comforting to them. And I think I've talked about most of these, really. We, you know, like I said, we had to change our wording at the beginning. I think people right now are much more comfortable, and our students are much more comfortable with talking about suicide than our faculty and staff are, but they're getting there, and that's really through the help of some of our champions as well. And lastly, I think, you know, we learned very quickly, the culture of our campus was that our students weren't going to do this on their own. We couldn't hand them something. We couldn't put this on a website and just think that they were going to seek it out. We had to be very purposeful and have an opportunity for them to do it. Now, once they did it, they spread the word to other students and created other opportunities for us. But hanging up posters on our campus just wasn't going to get the job done. So I think I'm actually done now. I think I've finished all my slides. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome.
This was a great testament of all the work and effort that you've done at your campus, and it really has translated to a lot of great utilization. So we applaud you for all your efforts, and thank you for sharing your story. Now, before I turn it over to Valerie, just a reminder to folks on the line to please have those questions come in. We're compiling a list right now, so you can easily put into the question box anything that may come of the discussion from Michelle or from Valerie, who's about to speak. You'll also have the opportunity to tweet us at Cognito and hashtag Cognito Webinars. Now, without further ado, we will hear from Valerie Donovan from Wisconsin-Madison.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Michelle, for sharing some of your strategies from your campus. So before I kind of dive into some of the strategies that we've used in some of our implementation process on our campus, I want to talk a little bit about campus environments. And I know that, you know, this webinar is specific for folks that work in large four-year schools, and I assume that many of us probably have similar challenges with this environment, and there's certainly strength to it as well. But so just to recap a little bit about the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we have just over 21,000 faculty and staff on our campus, and just over 43,000 students, with 32,000 of those being undergraduates. So we're certainly a pretty large institution. We're also a primarily white institution. Over 70% of our students identify as white. We have about 5,600 international students and about 600 student veterans on our campus. We actually, our university-wide system across the state of Wisconsin offers Cognito's veterans training for all of our campuses free of cost. So we do participate in that, but at UW-Madison, student veterans are a pretty small pocket of our student body. And then 60% of our undergraduates are Wisconsin residents, and our first-year students are highly residential. They live in residence halls. So we have about 7,000 first-year students in residence halls on our campus. We also participate, similar to what Michelle said, in the Healthy Mind study on our campus. So we did that in February of 2016 or 15 to look at some health data for our campus. And one of the kind of interesting findings from that was this discrepancy on our campus between perceived stigma and personal stigma. So I think that's something that's probably pretty similar across all college campuses, but that certainly makes, I think, some of the strategies around suicide prevention a little extra challenging, though there's some opportunities, I think, for social norming there. We also know from that same study, though, that 40% of our students reported that they have received support for their own mental or emotional health from their friends. And so we've really kind of used that informal help seeking among our students as a leverage point to promote at-risk as a way to build capacity to help your peers, knowing that it's pretty likely to happen. I also just kind of generally want to point out about our campus, too, that we're very decentralized and spread out. Our main campus is over 900 acres, and we really do not have a centralized communications system for our institution. So a lot of the work that I do around suicide prevention initiatives involves convening people from across campus. And so a lot of my strategies for implementing the at-risk program and other suicide prevention efforts has to do with really cultivating those relationships across campus, identifying stakeholders, and spending a lot of time bringing people together and getting them on the same page. So we can go to the next slide. So I mentioned our stakeholders that I work with. So we have on our campus a campus-wide suicide prevention council, and I've mentioned that I've been in this role for about 4.5 years. This group has been meeting monthly for about 4 years now. So this is one of the first things that I did, and I think has actually been what has led to our most success in terms of implementing at-risk and other strategies related to suicide prevention. So on this slide, I've listed kind of the key partners, the main folks that are involved in that group. We also have several community partners and student representatives in any given semester. That kind of changes a little bit depending upon, graduation and who's around. But in general, we have at our monthly meetings, I would say 15 to 20 folks from across campus and in the community as well. A big part of our strategic plan for implementing at-risk as a training opportunity on our campus is through our council stakeholders. So these are really the folks that are helping craft the message, that are helping push out communications about what at-risk is, what it can offer, how it's helpful for our students. These are also folks that will share the opportunity with stakeholders that they work with, maybe students that they employ or student orgs that they work with. They also will utilize their different newsletters and social media outlets to push out the message. So I really can't stress enough that we rely on these key partners for at-risk as well as other initiatives. So other kind of outreach strategies that we utilize, we do a couple times a year, usually a campus-wide email to all 43,000 students. And I'm happy to share samples of any and all of these strategies with folks too. So feel free to reach out if you're interested in seeing those. We also partner with professors of specific courses on our campus. And I know Michelle mentioned that reaching out to maybe some of the deans or chairs of departments wasn't successful for them. For us as well, those folks are a little bit less reachable for us than, say, an instructor of a counseling psychology course with maybe some crossover in terms of content. So once a semester, we review the course catalog and identify about 40 instructors or teaching assistants and reach out to them directly and intentionally about the connection and overlap with their course. A lot of them opt to offer extra credit for participating or even just promoting it as an option for the students in the course. We also offer, myself at the Health Services, to help kind of track completions for those folks. So we offer that as well. You know, I mentioned we have 7,000 students living in on-campus housing. So we do a little bit of outreach to those folks as well, usually through a postcard we put directly in all of their mailboxes with information about the program and especially about the incentives. We do drawings for Amazon gift cards each semester, which on a large institution, Amazon is a really great, I guess, venue to share gift cards with because you can email them directly to students instead of coordinating pickups. And we also leverage our student organizations on campus. So part of my role is to act as a liaison to the student orgs that work on suicide prevention, mental health, and wellness. On our campus, we actually have over 1,000 registered student organizations every year, and about 10 of those currently are specifically dedicated to mental health. And so I work directly with those 10 groups to identify student leaders on campus who might be interested in helping us promote this, or even offer it to their members as an opportunity to get maybe a point towards being an active member or something like that. You know, I also mentioned that we have some other mandatory first-year ed programs, specifically alcohol and sexual assault and diversity training. So really kind of what I've been trying to do is focusing a little bit more of outreach on upperclassmen and student leaders, and really recognizing that our first-year students are getting a ton of information and are required to do a lot of health education work around different issue areas. And so we've been kind of working with other students on our campus. You know, I mentioned some of the other, lessons learned. So other things that we've done on our campus that I think have been helpful are to create a campus-specific discussion guide for follow-up discussions with groups of students who complete this. So for example, all of those instructors that we reach out to every semester, we offer this discussion guide as a tool for them, or we offer trained student facilitators that I work with at the health center to come in and lead a peer debrief with their group. And that includes some information that comes from the Cognito discussion guide specifically, but we really tailored it to the specific needs of our campus and our resources. One thing that we've really learned on our campus is that for faculty and staff, especially that are going to be promoting this to students, they really want to know that it's evidence-based. They want to know about how effective it is and what the specific learning outcomes are. I think that's probably true for a lot of folks that are in higher ed, that's an important thing to keep in mind with your communications and the way you talk about these programs and strategies. People will also often ask us in that situation when we do kind of outreach and promotion if suicide is a problem. And so I think that's just something to kind of keep in mind and be aware of how you're going to respond to those kinds of questions. Additionally, it's been really helpful for us to tie the at-risk program to our campus-wide strategic plan. So that group of stakeholders that I listed on a previous slide, helps craft our campus-wide strategic plan for suicide prevention, and we embed at-risk into that plan so that all of those folks at the table feel some responsibility for the program's success. So it's not just one staff person here at the health services pushing out a program and trying to get folks to buy in. Also, the council group also reviews the data regularly to take a look at trends. You can go to the next. So just in general, some feedback that we've gotten from our students on our campus about the at-risk program is that they really appreciate that it's interactive, that it kind of feels like a game to them, and that's different from other online trainings that they've participated in where you can maybe just let a video run and don't have to interact with it that much. Maybe you take a quiz at the end. So I think when Brian demos that, that'll be pretty clear to folks, but that's something that our students have especially liked. It's brief, 30 minutes, shorter than a lot of other online or in-person education programs, and it's accessible 24/7 with it being online, so it really meets students where they're at. You can create a customized resource page with the program, and so we've really intentionally included our campus partners in this and had them draft specifically what content they want about their offices there to kind of increase their buy-in and keep them involved in the actual implementation and ongoing evaluation. And then in terms of goal setting, so we've trained about 2,000 student leaders on our campus, kind of really focusing on those student influencers, upperclassmen on our campus. But in terms of, I guess, goal setting around how many folks you want to train or who you want to reach on your campus, one thing that we've found helpful is to look at the diffusion of innovation. So thinking about sustained culture change on our campus. So for example, with at-risk, we want to normalize a culture of care on our campus. Normalize checking in with your friends and talking about mental health openly and talking about resources. And in order to do that, diffusion of innovation theory suggests that we need to reach a critical mass of our population with that message and training. So that's about 10 to 20%, depending on the literature you look at. So for our campus, obviously our goal, we're hoping to get closer to 4,000 students. So we're about halfway there right now. So that's, I think, something to keep in mind as well when you're talking with your partners, so they can really see the kind of full scope of your plan there.
Great, thank you so much, Valerie. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head when we're thinking about how to make this sustainable, and how my team really gets involved is to setting those goals and working with folks like you to make sure that those goals become a reality. I also wanted to thank you for mentioning the other simulations in our suite. You mentioned the Veterans on Campus, which is something we're not touching on today, but we want to make sure that it's highlighted as you did bring it up, and I believe so did Michelle. Now, just to take the opportunity and moment to speak on what Cognito does and give you all a preview of one of our simulations, which is the at-risk for students. We do have a faculty and staff version, but we wanted to give you a preview of the student one. Now, these are created as role-play simulations or conversations, so students and faculty alike can practice mental health skills since that is what they're going to be doing in real life. So we're going to have a little quick demonstration. And now I wanted to just give you the heads up. We're streaming this from a computer, so there might be a slight lag, but we'll turn on the captions, which is also a feature within the simulations itself.
These are all signs of distress that are fairly common on high school and college campuses. And I'm not surprised if you have known people like this in your life. That's why this topic is so important. When our friends feel overwhelmed, sad, or anxious, we are usually the first ones to notice, and the first ones they come to when they need to talk. In this simulation, we'll talk about how do you know when a friend needs help? How do you talk to a friend you're worried about? And where can you and your friend go for help if the situation seems too big to handle on your own? Here's how it'll work. First, you'll meet some friends here at school and figure out which one is most in distress. Then you'll learn some really useful conversation skills and try them out in a simulated conversation with the friend in distress to See if you can get them to open up and look for help. So let's get to it.
Great. So that was the introduction of the simulation. We wanted to highlight the main menu real quick. So as you're going through the simulation, it lands to this main menu page, which features a description of the simulation you're about to experience, the length, which is really important for folks that have limited time. But for each of the simulations, you can stop progress and continue where you've last left off. So that's really important when thinking about going through the experience. So you have that stop and go playable experience. Now, each of the components are listed here with the overview, which you just watched, and a friend in distress, and then also lists how long each of those portions are. But now we're going to the gaming component that Valerie mentioned, which is the interactive.
And his friends have done the right thing by reaching out to him whenever he did to ask if he was okay or wanted to talk. So far, he hasn't really opened up to anybody. And today, Jesse is going over to his place to see him. You'll play Jesse, and your goal is to let Travis know you're concerned and find out how he's doing. Conversations like this are best face-to-face, but any conversation is better than none at all. However you have a conversation like this, it should be private. So let's head over to Travis's apartment to talk.
Hey, sorry the place is such a mess. You got over here so fast, you know?
Hey, I don't care. I just feel bad for Whiskers. Looks like he's scared to get off the couch these days.
Yeah, I think you may be right. Hey, you want a beer?
Oh, no thanks. I'm good.
Great. Now, as you can see, it's prompting you to choose the talk menu, which you're able to choose a pathway and which direction you want to go with the conversation. So the two options are make an observation or make small talk. We can select an option such as, I feel like we don't hang out anymore.
I feel like we don't hang out much anymore. What are you up to?
Oh, just work. I have so much stuff to do you wouldn't believe.
Oh, like what?
I've got like 5 or 6 projects I'm supposed to be working on.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. A couple of props last semester gave me extensions, so that's a ton of work. But now this semester's piling up too.
Great. And one of the features that I wanted to highlight here is a new button that pops up, which is the virtual coach. Now, the virtual coach gives you immediate feedback on the decision or the choice that you just made. So the virtual coach in this instance said, this is a great way to start the conversation. You brought up Travis's absence in a non-judgmental way using an I statement. I feel like we don't hang out anymore. Good job. So it prompts you to choose another option in the talk menu. Now I want to just show you what happens when you make a misstep. So why don't we go to expressing a concern, and we're all worried about you, think you're depressed.
We're all really worried about you. We think you're depressed.
What? Well, I'm glad you guys have it all figured out.
So now the virtual coach doesn't bubble up at the bottom of the page. It actually has a pop-up saying labeling Travis as depressed only puts him on the defensive. Plus, it sounds like all his friends have been talking about him behind his back. No wonder he got upset. And in this instance, you're forced to choose the undo button and choose again. Great. And so you can continue through this conversation through the talk tracks if you want to go and express a different concern, relate to him, or even follow up on some of the signs of psychological distress that he is experiencing. But that's just a quick snapshot of what you will experience through one of our simulations. And I wanted to also reference that it is, again, part of the NREP, which is SAMHSA's National Registry. Now I wanted to switch gears to the Q&A portion. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we have about 10 to 15 minutes. Now this is the opportunity for you to take what you've heard from the panelists and all their initiatives on their campuses, and feel free to type in your questions in the chat box, so any of them, and we can answer the questions as they come in. So I'll have the two panelists unmute. As I see a question for both Michelle and Valerie. It says, did the vet office find a way to implement Cognito without the pressure of a stigma? And the second question associated with it is, how is Cognito work from the vet office? How about we start with you, Michelle?
Okay, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I think it took a little bit of time, and really, again, I feel like a broken record, but kind of sitting down and relationship building and letting them know, what we were trying to accomplish with Cognito, which was not, pinpointing groups on campus that we thought were at higher risk for suicide and throwing this simulation at them, but, really to get conversations started on campus with people that we thought were important members of that conversation. So I think when we were able to kind of sit down and have discussions that looked like that, we were able to get them on board. And they have partnered with us with Cognito. They recommend that their vets take it. They have a lounge area on campus, and they make it, the login is available there, so if people are just sitting around. But I think more importantly than that, they volunteer and partner with us on our outreach events. So even better is that we have people there that are vets, that are representing the vet center, and also, talking about how important mental health is on campuses. And so, again, it's kind of just had that effect, that snowball effect, and gotten bigger from that. So.
And I guess from the University of Wisconsin, currently we have the at-risk for college students on our campus, and that's the one kind of program that I'm managing right now with regards to Cognito. And then system-wide across the state, we offer the veteran training. And so we don't really, I don't really work with the veteran population all that specifically, other than to include members from the Veterans Office in our communications and our broader strategy and plan for outreach around the general program for college students, so that they are aware of what we're doing and can we make sure we're talking about the program in an aligned way.
Great. Now it looks like we have a question around graduate students. I know the focus was toward underclassmen. What strategies do you recommend to reaching out to and supporting graduate students on your campus?
So I can speak a little bit about the University of Wisconsin and what we've done here. So I mentioned that we do outreach to some specific instructors each semester. And we also do a little bit of tailored outreach to teaching assistants on our campus, and really tailor the communication around their unique positions, sort of acting as employees, but also as students themselves, and promote the resource to them in that way. We've also found it helpful when talking to graduate students to emphasize the certificate that you receive upon completing the program, and that it can be absolutely something you put on your resume. And so I think that angle has been a little bit helpful, as well as just coming back to some of our Healthy Mind statistics, knowing that teaching assistants especially are folks that are sought out by undergraduates for maybe some more informal support before they might land at the counseling center, for example. So really recognizing that informal help seeking and that kind of student influencer role that teaching students play specifically, and then kind of trying to tailor our communication to graduate students.
At the University of Arkansas, we are doing a very similar thing to what Valerie talked about. We realize that teaching assistants and graduate assistants are often our front line to our undergraduate students in academic settings and in student leadership positions. So we just use Cognito to help equip them with another skill, because they really are interested and excited, and maybe, they're more willing to learn than maybe your tenured faculty member. And so it's really helpful if that first response can be an appropriate response. So.
Great, thank you for those answers. Now I see that folks had referenced your mention of making these health-related courses mandatory for freshmen at your school. Did either of you consider making Cognito mandatory for incoming students?
We talked about that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Valerie.
So we talked about that on our campus, and again, kind of one of the reasons why we have steered away from that is just because of the number of mandatory programs that already exist for first-year students. And I personally don't have the power to make it mandatory on our campus, which is why I really try to think critically with our council members and our stakeholders about who the best student leaders and social influencers on our campus are, and reaching out to those folks. So, we already do make a lot of things mandatory for first-year students. I think this would be a great thing to be mandatory on our campus in some capacity, and unfortunately, we're not there yet. So that's why our strategies are kind of our way around that.
Yes, we had talked about it at University of Arkansas as well. And again, the same issues that Wisconsin was having is that we have mandatory alcohol, mandatory sexual assault, and it's, as soon as you tell an 18-year-old that it's mandatory, and they just think it's boring, and we know that they're not always getting a lot out of those. And so there were different things, there are different ways that we looked at doing it, and one of the ways that we thought possibly that we could kind of do a little bit more of a backdoor type of mandatory thing was through a university perspectives course that all freshmen have to take, kind of an adjustment to the university class. But again, that's where we were hit with a surprise that the provost was concerned that he would be getting too many phone calls from parents wondering why we were talking about suicide. So we knew that wasn't an option either. We have support from the Dean of Students Office, who this year is going to be working with us in sending out a postcard to all incoming freshmen to their home, encouraging them over the summer to take Cognito. We have no clue how that's going to go, but we're thinking that possibly if mom and dad or whoever is in the home sees that postcard, they may be encouraging their student to take it. So time will tell if that is effective or not, but I have mixed feelings about making it mandatory. I think sometimes when you make things mandatory, they lose a little bit of their meaning. So.
Oh, thank you for that. And actually, I could answer this briefly as well. We worked with a lot of folks over the summer who have the intent to require this before they even get to campus. And one of the we had a handful of schools take on that initiative that all incoming freshmen require it before they even set foot on campus, and that's something that we've seen slowly occur. So we appreciate your efforts in exploring that, but we definitely see that here at Cognito. Mm-hmm. Now, given that question, when are key times of the year that you were able to engage faculty and students to take the simulations?
So I can speak, I guess, to our faculty and staff outreach and our kind of partner outreach, the folks that we rely on to disseminate this information to students. So we do a lot of that work over the summer in preparation for the fall. So really getting on people's agenda early on helps us get things required maybe for a course requirement or for student employment onboarding. That's been kind of helpful timing for us in that regard. With some of the outreach to the first-year students and to maybe student organization leaders, they're on sort of a different timeline where the first few weeks of the semester are super busy and there's a lot of new information and it can be a little overwhelming. So we tend to wait then until about 6 weeks into the semester before we do heavy outreach to students directly from the health services. So it depends on who our audience is. But we do create social media kits and kind of talking points and pre-craft some of our newsletters that other campus partners will utilize and share throughout the entire semester. So we do have kind of a communication strategy set up going into the semester.
We at Arkansas find that we're also pretty busy in the summertime. In August, we work with a lot of student leadership groups, and so we're training peer mentors in the engineering program before the semester starts, and Gamma Chi's before Rush starts, and those types of things. And then what we see is during the year, as kind of new leadership is coming through different student organizations, we're doing those trainings. Our faculty and staff, we're really doing on an ongoing basis. We're aware of kind of all the enrichment things that are going on campus, and we're always trying to invite ourselves. So, it's an ongoing effort. And I think my role is a little bit different than Valerie's in that I'm not 100% dedicated. My time isn't. I'm also a clinician. So it's really whenever we can eke out time to do that. So.
Thank you all. And this is the last and final question. We're seeing a few questions on this, so I hope to bubble this up into this the main idea. What are suggestions for campuses to receive funding for these types of programs and or get buy-in from your administration to get that funding?
So on our campus, I really can't stress enough the importance of cultivating relationships with your stakeholders. And right now, our Cognito program is fully funded by the health services. And we know that moving forward, we're going to be asking other folks to pay into that. And especially as we go back and look at the demographic data of who's completing, we see that, all 200 house fellows or RAs on our campus are completing this. Maybe our partners in housing want to contribute to this a little bit. So that I think is really kind of one of our main focuses around kind of that shared responsibility and shared strategic plan more broadly.
Yeah, I echo that. We, when we first went around and kind of did our dog and pony show, we did it with the understanding that we weren't asking anybody for money, but we're kind of taken aback at how many people at that time were offering to assist us in the future if we needed to. We also are always exploring grant opportunities. We have some small grants that are offered through campus partners, and what we have found that now that the dialogue is more open on campus, those partners are more excited to entertain our grant. And so I think it's just kind of been a progression over time as we were able to get somebody to fund us in the beginning, which is our health center and our counseling center. Opportunities have arisen to keep it going. So.
Thank you for those great answers. We wanted to thank everyone for joining today. It is 2 o'clock on the dot, so we appreciate the full hour that you gave to us. Thank you to Michelle and Valerie for being great panelists. And as a reminder, our contact information is on the screen, so feel free to reach out to any one of us or follow us on Twitter and send us a message with #CognitoWebinars. Thank you again, and we'll send out a recording following this webinar. Have a great day, everyone.